Welcome back, people of the pod, season 4, episode 5, Office Hours with Carp and Loge. As I always am at this time, I'm Peter Loge, an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University and a strategic communications consultant. And I am joined, as I always am at this time, by
Dave Carp, also a professor at George Washington University in the School of Media and Public Affairs. Currently very curious, Peter, who are you at other times?
You know, that's between me and my bartender.
Yeah, you know, that should be for a therapist, not a bartender. Are you confusing bartenders and therapists again?
There's no confusion. There's no confusion. No.
It's Office Hours with Carp and Loge, where some men, rather than seeking a therapist, just get a podcast.
Exactly. That's what my students are for. I found therapy, I give people money and I maybe feel better or worse, and it's complicated. Being a professor, people pay me money and I feel better about myself because
it's the perfect crime. Yeah,
it really is. It is. Yeah. It's a long con, really.
Yeah.
Any parents at home listening, honest to goodness, it's worth 75 grand a year.
But if parents at home are listening, we're sorry.
We're sorry. You made your bed. Although, and as I've told my students many times in the past, you've made a huge tactical error in majoring in political communication and not public health, because my lovely young wife, Professor Zoe Beckerman, was just named a professor of the year for GW.
Wow.
That was announced publicly this morning. She's a Bender Award winner, which means you have to have current and former students write letters, colleagues. It's actually a really big deal. So she's a Bender Award winner, which for those of you not at GW means she's one of the George Washington University's professors of the year. We have a lot of professors, a lot of whom are really, really good. Then there's me and Dave. And Zoe in the School of Public Health and the Department of Health Policy and Management will be honored along with a handful of others in a couple of months.
That is great. That is a genuinely big deal. It is also empirical evidence that you married up.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I know my role in all of this. There is no confusion. Dumb luck and minor tactical errors are the theme of my life. And that is certainly, of all of the people to whom I am related, from whom students could learn, I am like the worst choice. You get Kim Gross in SMPA, you get Zoe Beckerman in the School of Public Health, you get Dean Loge, who taught writing at Yale. I don't know what kind of professor.
And then there's you.
It just goes on. It just goes on.
It does.
And yet, my students are listening to this thinking, is it too late to transfer? Is it too late? Yes.
Yeah, it is. Anyway, let's get to it.
So, what do we got? First of all, thank you everybody for listening, following, rating, tell your friends. Thank you, Alana, for your endless patience, because you have to listen to this every time. Also, thank you to everybody who tuned in to our online event. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, last week, on ethics, AI, and ChatGPT with me and Dave, one of our students, Yvonne Lachone, and a colleague, Zainab Chowdhury, who's also at New Heights Communications. I thought it was an interesting conversation, got some good feedback.
It's great.
More than 100 people, I think, have now viewed the video online. So it's online at and we'll put the link up on the website. So thank you, everybody. And we'll get to more ChatGPT later. But first, before we get to ChatGPT, Dave, you have a joke from 2 weeks ago. Let's revisit it.
So undignified. So I texted Peter after the event because I realized there was a witty remark that I should have and didn't make. And Peter has now insisted that I should make it here 2 weeks later, because that's how my jokes work. So it's true that when in the course of that event, when we mentioned the decline in podcasting revenue, which has been reported in the New York Times, it's true the podcasting boom is kind of over. What I should have said is that the podcasting boom is just like a party in college where everything ends the second Dave arrives. Yes, I realize not that good of a joke, and it's 2 weeks late, but anybody who knows me knows that's kind of how my jokes work.
I think that's a good joke, and it's a quality joke. And I think those people who want context, go back, review the previous episodes. I think
you can listen and hear the moment when Dave maybe could have made that joke for half a laugh. Anyway,
I think they're really clever out there. We'll cut and paste your punchline and just edit it into the previous episode, and then we'll email it around. and we'll all be happier. And the sponsors will love that kind of ingenuity. Sponsors who will eventually give us money. We should probably talk about something meaningful.
We should. Listen, so I want to know, we are recording this on Tuesday. It's going to come out on Wednesday. And according to at least one former president, there's a prediction out there that that former president, Donald Trump, might be in chains by then. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that he's feeling a little bored and maybe a little freaked out, staring at his phone, and now he's trying to make everybody look at him again. But just in case when this comes out, he has been arrested. What do you think of all that?
That's the political punditry of the moment, right? This is going to remake Donald Trump and he's coming back, or this will doom Donald Trump. And I think some of the best analysis notes that what this will do is everybody will say, I told you so. Mm-hmm. Right? All of his hardcore supporters will go, aha, I knew it all along, the deep state, and everybody pay who among us hasn't paid off a porn star with secret hush money and violated campaign finance laws at some point. Those are youthful indiscretions. And everybody else will go, see, I told you so. He's this corrupt, self-aggrandizing porn star paying corrupter. And so in the short term, like, you might, like, the enthusiasm among his base that was waning might come back. That will fade. I think it's telling. So before we came on, I went to 538 that does the tracking polls of favorability and unfavorability. And again, I'll put this on the footnotes. Trump's favorability as of March 20th, which was yesterday, 41.8%, unfavorability at 53.1. If you go back through time to April 2020, Trump's favorability has hovered around 40 to the mid 40s. His unfavorability has hovered mid 50s to low to mid 50s for since March of 2021. Mm-hmm. Like, nothing's moving. It's noise, but nothing's moving. Mm-hmm. And there'll be a bit of a bump and then it will fade. I think what it does do is create openings for people like DeSantis to say, aren't we just tired of the crazy? You get all of the policies, all of the anger, all of the social vitriol, none of the indictments, none of the porn stars. And certainly in a general election, if Trump manages to pull his, 35% of the Republican base that's not going anywhere with him, I think this is, as a little d Democrat, I think it's terrible news, because there will be riots and there will be violence and there will be lies and there will be nonsense. As a big D Democrat, sure. Like, this dude has never gotten more than 40 some odd % of the popular vote. Okay, bring it. But I don't know that this changes anything other than a news cycle. Might make it marginally harder for him. As a campaign guy, I haven't worked on a candidate campaign in a long time. As a campaign guy, I would never advise a candidate to get indicted or arrested. Like, that's just not part of the standard playbook, but I don't know. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. Seth Maskett, who is one of the political scientists doing the best work covering elections and particularly intra-party dynamics. He had a good Substack post, I think, last week, saying all the people predicting that if he's indicted, that will make him the nominee are, and like, they're just making stuff up to make themselves feel better. And what really stands out, that, like, to me, this all happens in the context of the November 2022 election not going as well as they expected. Right. Them doing poorly against expectations, because had they had the red wave that they expected, then right now you would have a lot of party enthusiasm, bring it on, and probably an awful lot of Trump is our guy, like, let's ride to victory next time. And instead, as always happens for parties when they lose compared to expectations, particularly multiple elections in a row, the recriminations internally are starting. So Republicans are fighting Republicans. We talked about this last time with CPAC turning into a ghost town. Right. So if you are currently a DeSantis, like one of the online DeSantis supporters, you're going to be looking at this and, first of all, shaking your head and saying, this is not good for us. This doesn't help us win. But also, like, the fights you're picking right now as a DeSantis supporter are with Trump supporters. So you're going to say that really loudly. And for once, instead of trying to piss off the liberals, you're going to try to piss off the loud Trump people, because that's the near-term fight. Near-term, it's over a year away, but like, that's the upcoming fight that you need to win. So in those dynamics, I just don't see anybody who currently has misgivings about Trump saying, oh, well, now that he's getting indicted because he lied under oath about like the embezzlement of funds. Like, I don't think anyone's going to look at that and say like, all right, this has now convinced me I'm back on Team Trump. It's a nuisance and a headache. Now, I do think the thing that does worry me is amongst his hardcore supporter base. We saw on January 6th, we have plenty of people who are willing to commit acts of violence because they believe that there is a deep state out there controlling us all. And some percentage, I don't know what percent, but some percentage of them probably think that that deep state is also globalist, i.e. Jewish. And so I do have a little bit of worry that if he is arrested, that is going to lead a set of people inspired by the conservative media that they envelop themselves in to commit acts of terrorism. Like, I think the likelihood of acts of stochastic terrorism goes up if he is arrested. That is not a reason not to hold elite people accountable for breaking the law. But it is a thing to watch and be worried about. Like, I'm just going to be a little bit more on edge if he's arrested, because I'm going to be a little worried that people who support him, like some of his random supporters, might be targeting people like me over the course of the following week. It's not great that we live in that world, but that is the world that we live in right now. So I think that becomes a little more likely. I don't think it changes at all the likelihood of him becoming president. Now, I also still think that he's probably going to be the nominee, all things said and done, because I think DeSantis is going to wilt under the big lights once they start shining. I also will hand it to Trump. Meatball Ron is a pretty good nickname. So he's gone from calling him Ron DeSanctimonious to Meatball Ron. Like, that one stings, I gotta say. So I still think that Trump is gonna be the nominee, whether or not he's indicted. Like, he might run from jail, I don't know. But that's where we are. I think all the expectations that this is going to change everything are pretty much wrong.
Yeah, I think that's right. There is nobody out there who thinks, well, this is the final straw.
Yeah.
But I also do think that if there is violence, you might see some Republicans who have been sort of trying to finesse this, stop trying to finesse it, and say, okay, we're done here. And everybody keeps saying that, but I keep coming back to an article from Quarterly Journal of Speech ages ago on Evan Meacham. So Meacham was the governor of Arizona a long time ago, used car dealer, was elected. Turns out he was corrupt. Who would have imagined such a thing? But I know, right?
You can't trust the used car dealers. Who can
you trust? Arizona had this string of indicted governors, like used car dealer and a developer. Really, in Phoenix, a developer was corrupt? I can't. Who could have? At any rate, but it was using a critic, mid-20th century critic named Kenneth Burke, right, who argues for archetypes of sort of people, and one is the hero. And Meacham came in as this heroic outsider figure. I'm going to fix things. I'm going to shake things up. Kind of an American trope, right? The businessman who knows how to do things right. So then he went from hero to buffoon, and buffoon is another trope where now everything you do is clownish and gets in your own way. And so Meacham went from super popular to super unpopular, and tried a couple of comebacks that failed. And I keep waiting for that moment with Trump because the analysis fits and it doesn't quite happen. But at some point, I really do think this isn't a gradual demise. At some point, a bunch of people are just going to go, okay, we're done here now.
Yeah.
And Trump will retain, like he'll go from 35 to 30 or something, right? Or his favorability rating will drop 5 points. He'll keep his core base, but the Senator McConnell's of the world will stop trying to finesse it and go, look, just stop.
Yeah, I have two things to add on that. One is the Dominion lawsuit is going to factor into this in some manner, because I think it's going to be less the Mitch McConnell's than the Tucker Carlson's. And Fox has a real problem with this law. Like, it has a real problem with this lawsuit. And I think they are internally calculating, what do we need to do to retain our audience versus like OAN and Newsmax. And again, this is where Republicans fighting Republicans ends up really mattering, because they are going to be watching intently for any signs that what their audience wants is more DeSantis and less Trump. So I think that's where we would see it turn, is at some point the word is going to come down from Fox. Listen, not only are we on the hook for a lot because we lied on air, but also our viewers have lost their taste for him. Everybody, time to switch gears.
Yeah.
And if and when that happens, I think that's when it moves fast. The other thought that this brings to mind is it is easy to look at the Trump era and how his poll numbers never moved up or down and say, you know what, like nothing ever matters. I've been one to say that actually sometimes in print. It's worth keeping in mind that the predecessor for him on the Republican side, George W. Bush, left office with a popularity in the 20s.
Yeah.
And that was, that was post Katrina and post Abu Ghraib. We just kind of reached a point where even Republicans still supported the party, and they quickly invented the Tea Party so they could rebrand. But they kind of looked at the guy and said, you just suck at this. We're done. We're tired of it. And that hasn't happened for Trump, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen for Trump. And yeah, like if he's sitting around in jail, still complaining about how this is the deep state who caught him in all of his accounting lies, that might be when they say, you know what, we kind of like Meatball Ron. We'll give us some more Meatball Ron instead.
Maybe. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, but I would also note that Bush was never hugely popular. He was relatively unpopular until 9/11. Popularity spikes, then it continued to drift down. And there are other structural issues going on, right? I mean, the economy was like the global economy was on the verge of collapse, and you blame the guy in charge.
Yeah.
Right. So Bush never had the cult of personality. He never had the hardcore base to support. He was an R, establishment R. His dad was president. His grandfather was a senator. Like we're lining up, which is different than Trump, who's Trump. I mean, bear in mind the Republican platform for Trump's reelect was whatever occurs to Trump next.
Right. Like, and Trump is also a performer and a media personality in the way that George W. Bush never was. That's true.
Yeah. Bush was.
I feel like the standard wisdom from folks like me has been, once you have the nomination, you can win because people are just voting party line. And those numbers don't move kind of no matter who you are, right? The assumption is if you're the nominee as the Republican, you start out with 45, 46% of the electorate. Nice. And the next few percent either way is just like the next few percent is very hard to move because nobody moves. And maybe that was different 15 years ago. Like maybe like it's hardened a bit. I don't know if it's hardened a lot. But like that hardening, like it's entirely possible within the party network that Republicans will still vote for the Republican nominee and still give him the same favorabilities. But once they're done with a guy, they're done with a guy. And they're not done with him yet, but they could be.
Right. And that becomes a general. Anyway, this is all to be continued. We've been at this for way too long because you, my friend, want to talk about there's like an ATM or something on the West Coast that's
there's this bank. It's called Silicon Valley Bank.
Oh, right. That's where you keep your silicone. Is that right? I keep
that's where they keep the silicone.
It's like a blood bank, but for silicone.
It's like a seed bank, yeah, but for precious minerals. Yeah. You are so wise, and I just don't understand why it's your wife who got the teaching award instead of you. So wise.
Yeah, once again. Yep. I am related by marriage and birth to all sorts of well-respected academics and college professors. And of all of them, you're the one that I have a podcast with. That says less about you than it does me, my friend. I feel like that's nothing good. Anyway, since we last talked, there was a bank run. I didn't really know that bank runs were still a thing in 2023. That's because bank runs up until a week and a half ago weren't still a thing in 2023. And I feel like from a political communication perspective, particularly as somebody who studies a lot, spends a lot of time studying tech, like I feel like this was just fascinating. Like there were so many elements of this that felt like rich texts to me. Because first of all, the way that this started, apparently, I mean, the bank was mismanaged, but it was mismanaged in pretty pedestrian ways. Like they didn't invest all of their clients' money in NFTs. This wasn't like an FTX thing or downstream, or it wasn't like they were invested in FT. Like the various ways that Silicon Valley companies have been failing over the past year and a half, this is none of this. What Silicon Valley Bank fundamentally had done wrong was buy a bunch of long-dated treasuries
And those treasuries make money when interest rates are low. They lose money when interest rates are high. They should have done better. Like, I'm not a banks person, but all the banks people were like, what the hell did you have that much invested in that for? Everybody knew that interest rates were going up, including the head of the bank, who was apparently like in the California Fed. So like it was mismanaged, but it was mismanaged in like such a normal sauce way. And it was still mismanaged in a manner that like if nobody takes their money out, they would like the bank would have lost some money, but it would have been fine. They did a bad job of announcing that they wanted to raise some more capital to cover the gap. And that also led to somebody with a newsletter publishing in his newsletter that like he looked at the numbers and said in his newsletter, you know, technically these guys are insolvent right now. If everyone took their money out, they would be destroyed. And that newsletter kind of ended the bank, which I gotta say, speaking as someone as with a newsletter, hashtag life goals. But the reason that mattered is that all the big venture capitalists read this guy's newsletter, and they then literally freaked out in their WhatsApp groups. Like there were actual WhatsApp groups of like 100 or so venture capitalists saying like, oh God, there could be a bank run. If there was a bank run, since all of our investments have millions of dollars in Silicon Valley Bank, and the FDIC only insures up to a 250K, like if there was a bank run, then all of our investments would get wiped out. And they kind of like in a single, like in a couple WhatsApp groups, like worked each other up. Then Peter Thiel or Peter Thiel told all of his investments, get your money out. And everybody said, oh God, Peter Thiel's making a bank run. Let's make a bank run. And on what, 2 Fridays ago, $42 billion left the bank. And then the FDIC by like mid-afternoon had to take it over because more billions of dollars were still trying to leave the bank. So like the venture capitalists, like big, like Silicon Valley Bank was primarily catering to venture capitalists and startups. Like not just the companies, but also like their mortgages, their home, like all of their savings were in this bank above the 250K threshold. And they all freaked out and killed the bank, that like their bank. Which A tells us like these are not special geniuses. These are dumb boys who are just as vulnerable to panics as everybody else. It's also, I think, an indicator again of the runaway economic inequality that just makes everything worse. Because this wouldn't have been a problem a couple decades ago. The problem here is that a single text chain can freak each other out and then move $42 billion. If their investments, like if a small number of people didn't control that much wealth, they wouldn't be killing a bank by accident. They would have to do it like on purpose, probably. And then after this, after they freaked out and killed their bank and then realized, oh God, on Monday when the banks open up, nobody, like none of our investments can make payroll because the money that they had in the bank is gone because the bank is gone, including companies like Vox.com, like Vox Media was invested there. So, and like a bunch of companies, their payroll processors were invested there. So like this was going to be a real crisis had the FDIC not stepped in and said, fine, we're just going to cover everybody above the 200, like that 250K insured thing, like that's not a thing anymore. We just insure everybody's money in a bank, which like, okay, yeah, I think your money like your money in the bank should be your money. That it seems weird that that's how things would end. But just all of this led to a full weekend of Jason Calacanis and David Sachs, like the world's dumbest but loudest venture capitalists, freaking out on Twitter saying that this bank run is going to be worldwide. This is going to be the end of the banking system. Balaji Srinivasan, who's another one of these big players and is big into Bitcoin, has been insisting ever since that we're going to have hyperinflation in the United States within 90 days because the like era of banking is over, because they're convinced that this must be the beginning of a worldwide crisis as opposed to just a bunch of dumb boys freaking out. But like that freak out had the like all the hallmarks of crisis communications gone bad from people who didn't have a communicator who could pull them to a side and say, you made a mistake, here's how to fix it. So it has just been fascinating to watch these venture capitalists with their pants down, running around showing that they know nothing about banking and they can't even act in their own interests.
So I think from a comms perspective, there are a couple of things I think that become really interesting here. One is it's a reminder that once again, with apologies to Winnie the Pooh and A.A. Milne, we're all just bears of little brains. It's not those people who overreact. It's people who overreact, and we are people. And some are better at taking a breath and not overreacting. Some are worse at it. But ultimately, people tend to behave as if they were people. The second thing is, crisis comms, something spiraling out of control. You need a team to say, what's going on? Who matters? What's the goal here? How do we contain this? And that's a rhetorical strategy. Then from the outside, the other piece that I'm seeing, because I don't follow Silicon Valley or tech that much, and my money is not in Silicon Valley Bank, and I don't have that much of it anyway. But it's from the, look, this thing's happening that's bad. It seems super scary. What is it? What does it mean? What do I do about it? And now you have the competition to define the thing. Does this matter? And how much does it matter? And if so, what is it? And what is it evidence of? And what therefore do we do about it? And you have Senator Warren stepping into this void. You got activist groups stepping into, this proves I was right all along about Dodd-Frank. This proves I was right all along about consolidation of wealth and power in Silicon Valley. This proves I was right all along about capitalism. This proves I was right all along about whatever it is, right? So now you've got the battle to competing for the definition, and the emergent definition among policymakers, activists, whatever group you're in, determines what you then do about it. Right? Because the definition determines the range of possible outcomes, and you choose among those outcomes. And we go back to the traditional chart of get on the agenda, definition, status, options, choices, right? And so for me, that's what's been super interesting to watch. And there's not been a lot of reflecting on that in the media so much as, which surprises me a bit.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. That reminds me, once again, everybody should read the Schatzsnyder, right? Like, this is classic E.E. Schatzsnyder, conflict expansion, defining the core narrative, what this issue is, then sets the sides and defines the possibilities.
A definition of terms is the supreme instrument of power.
Exactly.
Which comes from Schatzsnyder, footnoted in Baumgartner and Jones. Just saying, got to get a plug in for Frank there.
Thank you for reminding me of my undergrad thesis.
So to be continued and to be followed. But again, I think from a comms perspective, if you're an advocacy organization, you either latch on to a definition that proves you were right all along, or at this point, you're frankly out of the game, because this stream has been moving for a while. But I think people like Senator Warren and some others in that space have done a good job of saying, see, this proves we need A. We had A went away, this horrible thing happened. Why? Because we don't have A, therefore we need A back. And there has to be a plausible story of that connection. Like, it intellectually has to make sense. The story has to sound true. But this failure is a result of a lot of things. Right? I mean, there's no one magical thing. It's a bunch of stuff, all of which are plausible, many of which are plausible. And it's the one you enter on, right? Its issues are multidimensional. They're all true, but the definition that wins determines a range of possible outcomes, all of which will be in the footnotes, including Schatzsnyder, but also Baumgartner and Jones.
And one other bit that I would point out there, because of course I want to, is the temporal element of it. Right? Like, part of what makes this interesting is, like, there was a bank run, there was a bank failure, which, I mean, if you had asked me on the day of our ChatGPT event, what do you think of Silicon Valley Bank? I would have said, is that a bank? Now, it was one of the 20 largest banks in the country, but like, I don't know the names of the 20 largest banks in the country. It's not a thing that I have to know or care about. And then when there's a bank failure, that leads to a window of opportunity. We can cite Kingdon too. That leads to a window where people are intensely interested in understanding, what the hell is this and how do I make sense of it?
Right.
And for advocacy groups who spend a lot of their time trying to frame and define issues and getting very little traction, that's because these moments are where you can get a lot of traction, because people are genuinely trying to understand, what the hell was that? Whereas in your day-to-day slog of, let's try to get people to pay attention to this issue while also defining it, there you're pushing a boulder uphill while also trying to redirect it. Whereas here, the boulder's moving and you're just saying, like, this is a way to make sense of a thing that you desperately want to make sense of.
I think that's right. And this actually, we talked about this in my strategic communications class this night in the grad program. We happen to be talking about policy entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
right? And one way to understand how policy change happens is there are people, individuals, you and I know some of them, who have a level of social acuity. They understand networks. They're nice. People like them, like to work with them. They understand strategy, how to frame issues. They understand time and timing. So they'll see an opening like this and go, you know what? This is a terrific opportunity to promote Senator Warren's favorite piece of legislation on this. I'll make some calls.
Yeah.
You build a quick coalition. You then reach out to friends in coalitions who work on financial industry reform, consumer protection, things like that, and say, you know what? Senator Warren really wants to jump on this. If we get you some talking points or a piece of model legislation, can you get behind it really quickly? And there's a person at the center of this who sees the window, sees the time, has access to the networks, is trusted among the networks, and will expend some of their own political capital or personal credibility to sort of lead by example and step into the void, make it easier for them, for others to follow. If you're listening to this and you're an advocate and you're thinking, aha, I should do this now, you've lost. You're too late.
Yeah.
Right. The
Timing matters
moment
a
to
lot.
strike that is you get a Twitter alert going, holy cats, this is bad. I need to act on this now. And holy cats is a thing. Google it. We're moving on.
I can't believe. So I want to just add a little bit of levity because I don't think I've told you about this yet.
You have cats?
No, God. I'm trying to bring some positive energy here. Don't throw that at me. So I did go ahead. I sent an inquiry to press@twitter.com yesterday. I reached out to Twitter's press office with an email. I wanted to inquire into Twitter's financial future. So I'm going to read you the text of the email. It was a quick one. I said, hello, how would you describe Twitter's financial future? And how would you describe Elon Musk's stewardship of the company? Thank you. Because I think it's important to check in with their official comms team and see what sort of answers they gave. They replied with a timely, accurate, and insightful response. Poop emoji.
That will be going in the footnotes, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, the reason for that, the actual story here, and the reason why I bothered with that setup, Elon did post to Twitter yesterday that starting now, because they haven't had a press team in a while, and there's been an open question, when are you going to rehire an actual press team who can respond to media inquiries? So he announced yesterday on Twitter that starting now, press@twitter.com just auto responds with poop emojis to all questions.
That's amazing.
He has decided that this is the clever way to stand up to the press, is no matter what your question is, my answer is poop emoji. Do you think this is a good comm strategy or a bad comm strategy for the world?
I have to say, for our listeners who are students in either of our classes, if you put that on an essay, I will applaud your chutzpah and then fail you. But you'll go down honorably. Let's shift time. Tempus fugit. So we're moving on quickly. You've got a terrific Substack that we're not going to talk a lot about because the clock is running. But the short version,
Short version, yeah, I got an email last week from somebody who wanted help tracking down an old article of mine. I'm always happy whenever I find out that somebody sees value in an old thing I wrote. But it was a little weird because I didn't actually recognize them. There was an article from 2010. I was like, I don't remember writing or publishing that. Maybe I'm getting old. So we had a few email back and forth where I tried to help him figure out, like, he had a full citation. He had a web link, a DOI, but like the web link was broken. It looked very real. And it was only after several emails back and forth that I said, this doesn't seem to exist. Where did you find this citation? And then the student didn't reply. Like that was the end of the conversation. So the Substack is about what I'm pretty sure happened there, which is I'm like 95% sure that this was my first encounter with a phantom citation generated by ChatGPT. And that's been leaving me thinking a lot about how do we responsibly use this stuff at all? Because my instinct going into it has been that these generative AI tools are probably a good place to start your research, but a bad place to finish it, kind of like Wikipedia. And already what I'm seeing is it's not even a good place to start your research because these models have no notion of the truth. They have no real grounding in actual truth or fact the way we understand it. And so they made up a plausible sounding citation, and then it was left to the student to try to track it down. he reasonably reached out to the author saying, hey, can you help out? Both of us mystified because it was just made up by a network of machines with no notion of truth. So it's, to me, it's just an indicator of the frustrating, wearying times that we're about to get into. And that's what I talk about in the piece. You want to
So-
talk about Plato now, don't you?
So, well, I'm going to in a second, but so to that,
Uh-huh.
two things. One is, so I read Dave's Substack. He comes by my office yesterday. I happen to be typing him an email quoting, this is not the copy of the Phaedrus that I showed you in my office, because it's the one I keep at home, one of the ones I keep at home. And
one of the, how many copies of this book do you have?
of the Phaedrus, I think only two individual and one in a collection of things, but I've got like 3 of the Gorgias and probably 4 Protagoras. I don't know, they're cheap. And like, I don't know. At any rate, Socrates asked Phaedrus what makes a good speech. Phaedrus says, what I've heard, my dear Socrates, is it is no necessity for the man who means to be an orator to understand what is really just, but only what would appear to be so to the majority of those who will give judgment, not what is really good or beautiful, but what will appear so, because persuasion comes from that, not from the truth. So basically, ChatGPT once again has simply reinvented the ancient Greeks. There's a lot going on with ChatGPT that I'm going to keep putting on ethicsonpoliticalcommunication.org in our blog, just updating a list. I'll also put it in our footnotes. Most recently, there's something called Campaign Tech put on by Campaigns and Elections. It's a conference put on by Campaigns and Elections. The agenda for their, excuse me, May 4th and 5th conference includes ChatGPT, DALL-E 2, Bard, and beyond, how generative AI will reshape campaigning. They talk about digital targeting, digital fundraising, but then in breakout sessions, they talk about, there's a rapid fire session exploring 4 potential applications for generative AI in political campaign space: copywriting, graphic design, GOTV, voter contact, persuasive messaging, and on and on. If you look at the Ethics on Political Communication website, again, there's a company called Polyscribe that is selling services to congressional offices to write first drafts of congressional mail, social media content, basically constituent communication. There's a professor at Stanford we talked about a few weeks ago who's experimenting with this for lobbying efforts. I mean, there's just a lot of people in the political space playing with this. A lot to unpack, which we will not do here. We did on our event. Media Ethics Magazine out of UT Austin is coming out with a special issue within the next, hopefully, 4 weeks. Dave and I have pieces and others about the ethics of this. Much more to come, but certainly worth tracking. All right, this is a long dog walk. I'm sorry to the dogs.
Let me just end. I want to ask one important question to you, or one question for the listeners to think about, which is, what does Peter Loge have in common with my 5-year-old daughter?
I give up.
They both love Plato.
How long did it take you to get that? You've been working on that.
The amount of time that I had to wait, not interrupting you, in order to deliver that joke. Listeners, I'm telling you now, and you're going to hear this from me a lot, it is always funny to confuse Plato with Plato. Always funny.
You know, I feel like that's a joke that could have waited for 2 weeks. That's all we got. It's long, it's weird. I don't know. It's what we do. It's been one of those runs. That's like you good, Dave? Anything good? Anything to add?
Nothing to add. I'll help come more Substacks over the course of the week, or the course of the next few weeks. But I'm looking forward to talking to you and everybody else about Donald Trump and chains when next we talk.
Where do they find your Substack?
davekarp.substack.com.
Are you still paying attention to the Muskiverse?
I'm still occasionally writing on that, and I think in the next couple of weeks I'm finally gonna write the essay I've been meaning to write, looking back at my book, The Move On Effect, 10 years later, or now 11 years later, and looking at how the models of digital activism have condensed in the decade since. So a nice one for those of you who are big fans of 10-year-old academic books.
We'll talk about that in 2 weeks when we get on to Move On, because they made me very fussy. I'm at PLOGE on Twitter, peterloge.com/podcast. You can get all the footnotes, and ethicsonpoliticalcommunication.org for all your ChatGPT AI ethical quandaries. Follow us, like us, tell your friends. That's what I got. Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple weeks.
Bye, folks.